Hello everybody and welcome to another in the deep dive series at the Petersen Automotive Museum. Today we're going to talk about the one and only Zebra Mustang built by George Barris for a 1965 movie, Marriage on the Rocks. The 1960s was quite an era for customization, and it was quite an era for movies. And when you put the two together, you ended up with some pretty unusual cars. Think, for example, of the Batmobile. Think also of the Beldone for the Jerry Lewis movie. But you also can't help but, in a way, think about the Mustang. This particular Mustang was built early in the production run of Mustangs, and it was one of the first to be customized. It was customized by none other than George Barris for the Frank and Nancy Sinatra movie, Marriage on the Rocks. Now, it didn't have a prominent role in the movie, but there was no mistaking the car when it was on screen for however short a period of time that was, with Nancy Sinatra sitting in the passenger seat, being driven where she needed to be. The car embodies just a litany of 1960s styling cues and customization treatments. The most obvious is the zebra fur on the side. We kind of jokingly say it's the only car that the Petersen Automotive Museum has to dry clean. We don't just send it through a car wash. This car needs special treatment. And the other very obvious thing about it is that it's lacking a roof over the front seats. It is in a genuine Targa style, but it's not convertible from open to closed. It's permanently open. And this is kind of an interesting way to hearken to an earlier era when the chauffeur sat in the open while the lucky owner and his or her companion got to sit in the back, comfortably shaded from the sunlight and protected from the elements. And maybe it's a good thing that the front of the roof was completely missing. Because what's interesting about this car isn't just on the outside, it's what's on the inside. And again, Barris tried to work in all these kinds of customizing themes, all these themes that spoke to good living and joie de vivre and the wealthy playboy / playgirl lifestyle. For example, this car has a television. What's interesting is that in 1965, you could really get a television in any Ford product. You could order a TV from Ford called Autovision. And this car, unfortunately, doesn't have one of those televisions, but it does have another portable television, black and white set, mounted underneath the dashboard, clear in the driver's view. Now, it also has a cocktail cabinet and space for cocktail glasses, which combined with the television makes you wonder if the idea was that this car was ever going to be driven under its own power, at least by a sober driver who wasn't distracted by what was on television. Because it kind of flies in the face of safety regulations today, but back then it was almost everything it needed to be. It was just over the top. And to look at it, you'd be hard pressed to know that it was a Mustang, because there's very little Mustang left about the car that's obvious. The front, for example, was given a quad headlight treatment, and not just two side-by-side round headlights. They were stacked rectangular headlights, which would eventually become very, very popular, but after about another 10 years. So this is George Barris kind of anticipating a trend. He also gave the front a very horizontal appearance that was mirrored in the rear. And it tended to lower the car just a little bit more visually to give it that sleeker, performance-oriented look. And if that didn't do it, then the mag-style wheels and the white letter tires probably would. And the whole thing that gives it away that it was Barris's treatment is the little Barris signature on top. Barris was not ashamed to show the world that he was in charge of movie cars when it came to Hollywood. George Barris was, in no way was he ever short of ideas. And for someone to take a car that in its day was brand new as a Mustang, hundreds of thousands of them were being turned out, the most popular car ever introduced up to that time, and turn it from something that was special, even to something that was more special. It took a real genius. But again, this is part of George Barris's genius. He didn't have to do much with the car to make it special. He just had to give it a few special touches, and he knew exactly which ones to do. Now, when you think about Hollywood, you have to understand that the cameras are not going to be looking under the engine. They're not going to be looking underneath the car, which means that George Barris really didn't have to do anything to hop up the engine, because what was special about this car was not what was powered it. It was the actors sitting behind the wheel and in the passenger seat, and the vehicle that framed the actors. It kind of gave them a little bit of, well, frankly, a lot of visual cachet, a lot of zest, a lot of life for the screen. And when you think of mid-60s movies, you think of the Beach Boy movies, you think of that kind of LA culture. The more extroverted motorist sitting, of course, in the open, but yet hearkening to an era of the past where you could really order anything you wanted. The sky was the limit as long as you had deep enough pockets. And interesting thing about the car also is that it's pretty obvious that it was not intended for cameras to get a very close look at certain aspects of it, because if you look under the front and you look under the rear, you'll see some brackets where the car was very likely hooked up to a tow vehicle or strapped on to a trailer to be driven around while the cameras could focus on the occupants. So here we are, a Hollywood car with a Frank and Nancy Sinatra connection, built by George Barris, that retains all of its original Hollywood glamour and all of its original hidden Hollywood tricks. Mr. Petersen discovered the car in 2001. It actually was the property of Don Chambers and Eileen Chambers at Mustang Country. And when we got wind that they were letting go of a couple of their, very important cars that they had collected over time, we asked them if the Zebra Mustang could be available, and they said yes. So Mr. Petersen wasted no time in acquiring the car, and we've had it ever since. Thank you, everybody, for joining me on another episode of Deep Dives at the Petersen Automotive Museum. We'll see you next time.